saw was a reflection in a mirror. I saw the face of the murderer.
Welcome to episode 26 of Mask of the Slasher. Today, we're talking about one of my favorite movies, Dario Argento's 1975 Giallo masterpiece, Deep Red, aka Profondo Rosso. Ooh. I personally think that this is the quintessential Giallo film, and it is also Dario Argento's best film. Some people are going to argue for Suspiria, and while that is a great movie, I still prefer Deep Red. I'm sure that Krista has some delightful fun facts to share about this movie, so I'm going to turn it over to her now.
Okay, so like Josh said, it came out in 1975, but that was in Italy. It came out on March 7th of 1975. Then on June 9th, 1976, it came out in the U.S., but it came out incredibly edited. It was cut back by, I think they said 22 minutes, and they cut out things that had to do with animals. I don't want to give a lot of stuff away. Right. And sexy time scenes, things like that. Right. So when I had thought I had seen this before, I might have fallen asleep, and this would have been like 10 years ago. I don't know. Giallo movies are very slow burns.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
You do have to have the patience for them. But when watching it today and taking notes and actually paying attention for the first time, I don't know that I've seen it before, or I just didn't pay attention originally. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. It was a new movie for me, essentially.
I feel like it's one of those where you've been in the room when I've had it on. But didn't really pay attention, because Giallo, I mean, I think you have appreciation for it, but it's not really your thing.
No, it's not. It's not. There's a couple aspects of it that I do like, which we will discuss. Mm-hmm. So when Josh said, okay, because I said, do I need to get my glasses for distance so I can read subtitles? And he said, well, there are some subtitles in it. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, part of it dubbed in English and the other part in it's still in Italian with subtitles. And I'm like, well, that's weird. So of course I looked it up, and what happened is that Anchor Bay decided to restore this at one point, and they only had certain parts of things, so they had to put together both the Italian, just plain ass Italian version, and they also had to put together the English version of it. So it can be a little jarring to watch. At first for me, I had to get used to it, to where it would flip back and forth between the two. So you do have to pay attention to this.
Right.
Otherwise you will absolutely miss stuff. And of course I'm writing down notes as I'm watching it. So then I would have to ask Josh, because they would, of course, flip to Italian when I'm writing notes. If they were still speaking in English, then I could do both at the same time. But no. So I thought that was really interesting, and I was happy that somebody spent the time to put it back together. I kind of still think it's strange, though, that they have a full Italian version.
Right.
And why didn't they just re-release it with dubbing, with English dubbing? Well, then I thought the better of that. And I think that, as we might have all noticed, throughout the years, people's cadence has changed.
Right.
And just the delivery of words and that kind of thing has changed, its tones and its approach. And you can tell that obviously back all the way to like the first talkies, and things like that. And even in the 70s, things were said differently, done differently. And so if they were to overdub it today, it would not have the same feeling. Right. It would feel out of place.
Right.
So it's a great movie. You just have to be patient with the dubbing and the subtitles.
Unless you want to watch you can watch just the full Italian version also.
And that's what we started with, and then I switched it to both, not thinking it was going to be that abrupt, that constant. But it is like almost mid-sentence sometimes. It'll change over, and you don't see, it's not like you see like the cigarette burn mark in the film or anything weird. It's flawless in the editing. Apparently there was some sort of goofs in there somewhere. I didn't pay attention to that because I
Right.
don't care.
Yeah.
But so I think that's my only real gripe about this.
Right, sure.
So
So yeah, I was saying earlier, I think it's the quintessential Giallo film. I mean, you always have to have that element of a murder mystery. You know, I think a lot of people kind of want to classify all Italian horror as Giallo, and that is not the case. It has to, in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of other people, it has to have that element of murder mystery. So, for instance, as I talked about earlier, Suspiria, not a Giallo. Even though Dario Argento directed it, he's arguably the master of Giallo. That film is not.
Yeah.
And that's what thing I like about this movie is, I mean, obviously I've seen it many, many times now. It's my favorite of his, but the first time you watch it, I think it does a pretty good job of keeping you guessing as to who the killer is.
Well, yeah, because I kept guessing. I
Right.
kept going, so is it that person? Is it that? Because I really did think that it was going to be that easy because of the time frame this movie was put out. People didn't go that in depth usually.
Right.
But I think because it is a Giallo movie and there was such a big craze for these at that point that people really had to keep stepping up their game to keep people guessing. And they did an amazing job because I really did not expect who it was. Yeah. We're trying to keep the spoilers down because
right. I'm not going to give away who the killer
I don't
is
think
or anything like that.
This movie has been watched as much as other ones, especially Suspiria.
Right.
It's just not as well known. And so I think that you know, I don't want to give everything away because I think that people will like this. But like I said, it's a slow burn. You got to pay attention.
Yes, absolutely.
Because the storyline is really, really good. And there's gore.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's not like a slasher gore.
Yeah.
It's a more methodical gore. And it's pretty corny.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and one thing I noticed with it, and I just never paid attention to this before, but when there is a kill scene, that angle or that shot is held an extra long time to really take it in.
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays we try to do it a little bit faster.
Yeah, it's a lot of quick cuts and things like that.
Yeah, so then it's like, what the hell?
Yeah.
You know, but this you're like, I appreciate what they did there.
Yeah.
You know, there's an appreciation for the gore a little bit more.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's where somebody like Rob Zombie has picked up on those kinds of things where he holds shots of things.
Right.
And really makes you think about it.
Yeah, and I would also say his use of color.
Yes.
Argento is the master, I think. One of the masters of using color. You know, especially in one of the early scenes where they're in that theater and it's all
Absolutely.
red. I mean, that's just an amazing shot right there.
And that's what I did think of because, you know, I do pay attention to these things for the most part. But that particular shot, it just hit me.
Yeah.
And it was just like, there's the Argento that I know. And then they end up in a shitty bathroom.
Right.
And that was, once again, jarring because you're in such a beautiful place with such vibrant color. And then you go to this bathroom that I'm like, how is this in a theater in any way? Because it was atrocious.
Right.
But,
yeah,
you know, he knows how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And something else interesting about this movie that I've always noticed is a lot of times the streets are deserted in it. Like there's nobody else on the street except for the characters. And it's just like they're kind of surrounded by all this architecture, you know.
Yes.
I read an article about this movie a long time ago where the author, and I'm sorry I don't know who this was because it's been so long, but it described it as the characters were buried in concrete. And I loved that description.
That is an amazing description.
Because it's just like they're just being oppressed by all this architecture around them, and there's nobody else on the street a lot of the time in this movie, and it manages to feel claustrophobic even though they're out in the open, which I think is a cool effect.
Absolutely. The other thing I had asked you about, just to make sure I wasn't just seeing something, I was like, doesn't the bar remind you of that famous painting where everybody's in the diner and it's like Marilyn Monroe and just famous people?
Yeah, I believe that painting's called Nighthawks, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong on that.
if you ever hear snorting
Snoring,
or snoring,
yeah.
yes, or a squeak in the background, anything like that,
It's all this
one
little
right
one's
here.
doing. Yep.
Yes. So anyway, there she is. You may hear some squeaks every once in a while. It kind of brings it back to what you're talking about with the architecture, because that's very different from all the rest of the architecture, which of course is really old ass Italian buildings and stuff. And then you've got this smooth and sleek diner.
Yeah.
That they make it a bar, but you know, the same idea. It looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
And I thought that was neat.
And what's also interesting about that bar is like all the people are almost like mannequins in there. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the significance of that is, but I found it to be very interesting.
I did too. Well, it could be that whole thing, like you were saying, you know, that just buried in cement and they're part of the architecture.
Yeah.
You know, and because I mean, obviously, like we just mentioned, the cinematography for this movie is equally as important as the storyline.
Right.
And it's something that stands out so much for people. Anytime you watch a Giallo movie, that's what stands out. So I definitely appreciate that part of it, because yes, like I said, it's slow burn, but if you actually take your time and look around at what their backgrounds are, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing. And to be able to appreciate what you do see.
Yes.
And something funny I noticed when we were watching The Beyond last week. If you haven't seen that video yet, go watch it.
Yeah, go check out episode 25, The Beyond. It's a good one.
I worked a day and a half to edit that.
It's part of our Italian series that we're doing right at the moment.
Anyway, is that, you know, we know that they re-enter sound into these movies, you know. It's not a big secret.
Right.
But damn it, they really want to make sure you can hear those steps.
Yeah.
Those extra sandy sounding steps of dress shoes on sandy cement.
Yes.
And it's a little bit much sometimes.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's funny to me, really, because I'm like, I mean, okay. It's not that important, but it almost takes me out of what we're watching because I focus on dumb stuff. And that's one of them. And I'm just like, oh, again, you know, I have to hear him walking again.
Right.
So anyway, that was my thinking on that.
How did you feel about the soundtrack?
Well, Joshua, I'll tell you. So the soundtrack was actually done by two different composers. Ooh. The first one, of course, is the amazing, the wonderful Goblin.
Yes.
And if you don't know who Goblin is, go look it up on Spotify, because they've done a lot of different soundtracks, and not soundtracks, but scores.
Scores, yeah.
I keep doing
that.
Sorry,
I say that interchangeably, so it's my fault.
Damn it, Josh.
I know.
Anyway, so they're very distinct in their sound, and so I appreciated that. There's also another gentleman. I'm going to attempt to pronounce his name. Sorry if I can't. But it's Giorgio Gasolini. Sure. I think that's what it is. Anyway, he is a jazz musician, so he helped with some of those parts of it. Just so and I don't know how much more he stepped in to between him and you know, the Goblin itself. But I still liked that because I do have an appreciation for jazz music.
Well, yeah.
As should others.
Yeah, it's nice that since the movie, the main character is a jazz pianist, it's nice that they actually had a jazz composer do some of this stuff, and instead of just, you know, throwing out any old music that they felt like, you know.
Yeah, because it could have been pretty bad.
Yeah.
And that the opening scene of them playing, I was like, oh, this isn't so bad.
Well, yeah, because we all know that some people's idea of what jazz is pretty terrible. So it could have been pretty bad.
Well, there's sometimes that jazz can be terrible depending on the subgenre of it.
Exactly.
Freeform jazz.
Anyway, so the music definitely is important in this. Towards the end, I really felt like, okay, look, can we change it up a little bit? Yeah, you know, because you started making songs to what it gets a
little repetitive for sure.
Yeah, they always get a little crazy with the keyboards.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And then I'm just like, Did a cat jump on the keyboard suddenly? Because that's a little weird, but I still absolutely love it.
So earlier we were talking about the gore and how Argento kind of lingers over the kill scenes a little more than, say, the quick cuts that we're used to in more modern films. Some of them are pretty creative. As far as there's a scene where a certain someone gets killed, who I won't reveal because it gives away a plot. But, first the killer kind of smashes her face against the wall and then fills up a bathtub with really hot water. And who has these scalding hot bathtubs? I'd like to know.
It's when water heaters weren't regulated in old buildings in Italy.
And then drowns her in scalding bath water. So I felt like that was pretty brutal.
Well, and the effects, the makeup effects for the actor, it's not like they were just like, oh, she's red in the face. It really...
Right. And that kill predates the one in Halloween 2, the hot tub kill in Halloween 2. So.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So. Stuff like that. I think the fact that each kill was so unique and different, I think that definitely helped out.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, they're kind of few and far between, and so when they do happen, they're quite brutal. So I think that really kind of punctuates the different sections of the film pretty well, because you've got one that kind of kicks off the whole, thing, the whole story, and then throughout there's kind of at different key points of the plot, kind of coincide with a kill. So I think the way they were used was very key to the plot, not just here we're going to show somebody getting brutally murdered. It kind of served as to emphasize those plot points.
Absolutely. Yeah. So without giving away too much of the story, we've talked about the cinematography and the locations and things like that. And obviously filmmaking in itself is artistic.
Yes.
It is an art form, despite what somebody may or may not think. But this movie also is highlighting other forms of art in it. And I thought that was really interesting because you have the music aspect of it with the jazz music. Then you have the blue bar or whatever it's called. That's a painting,
right? Technically
speaking, it's off of a painting. And then on top of that, there is a building at the end where the name of it is referenced into a famous artist.
Yes.
And art comes into play there as well. Not necessarily good art, but art in itself is actually put into it. And so I thought that was interesting, that it was a different type. It wasn't just, like I said, Giallo doesn't just have kill scenes. That's not what it's about.
Right.
They're an added bonus. And even the makeup, the special effects makeup and that kind of thing is an art form.
Right.
And it takes a lot of talent to be able to do that. As a whole, this movie is just an appreciation of art. And I think that's necessary. There is even another form, I can't say it, but another form of entertainment that is highlighted in here.
Right.
That's rather controversial these days.
Yes.
And so I thought that was very forward thinking of them to put that into this movie. I have watched other Giallo movies with you.
Right.
And I think that as we go along and we continue to review them and that kind of thing, I'm going to start to see, obviously, the similarities. I think the only other one I've really paid attention to was the one I bought you for Christmas.
Opera?
No, I've seen that before.
No.
Because I'm cool like that. No, the crystal...
Bird with the crystal plumage.
There you go. It's a long name.
Yeah.
Bird with the crystal plumage. It was on his Amazon list.
Yes. Another amazing Argento film.
Yes, which we will cover because that one definitely sticks out in my mind. You can even kind of ease yourself into Giallo. Like we said, Suspiria is not Giallo.
Right.
But you can ease yourself into the slow burn that Giallo is and the coloring from Suspiria.
Yeah.
So you could still kind of get the appreciation of the cinematography and the story and and that type of filming. And then you can work your way into Giallo. And I think I think Suspiria was my gateway.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
gateway
for sure.
Italian movie.
Yeah, mine as well.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, obviously in the Beyond too.
Yeah.
Once again, go watch it.
Yeah, watch our Beyond episode.
Yes.
So yeah, I just want to say real quick, I think this is if you're gonna start with Giallo somewhere, this is probably the best one to start with. Watch Suspiria first, so you can kind of get a feel for Argento's style.
Yeah.
Then move on to this one. You know, this movie, it's got action, it's got cool music, it's even got some comedic elements to it,
Absolutely.
which is interesting and kind of breaks things up nicely, I feel. Yeah. And good performances. It's just an amazing movie in my opinion.
Yeah.
One of my favorites.
Have you guys seen this movie?
Yes.
You should see this movie.
Yes, you should.
I definitely recommend it. We're going to continue to cover some of these. We might not be back to back, but we're going to continue to cover them. Also, if you may have noticed, we have moved back to Mondays.
Monday.
Just because some things have changed here.
Yes.
So we're able to move back to Mondays, which is where we wanted to be to begin with. And then, just watch for us. I don't know specific times yet.
Yeah.
You'll see it when you see it.
That's right.
But if you subscribe,
you won't have to worry about it because you'll know when we come out with new stuff.
Yes.
And it helps us out too. And it's totally free.
Absolutely.
You've got nothing to lose by subscribing.
Bell at the top.
Yep.
Notifications.
That's right.
Notifications.
That's right.
So also we appreciate, comments, likes. Definitely share.
Yes.
Anything you can do, and that goes not just for us, but any YouTuber. So, anyway, I think that's it for this week.
I think so.
All right. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.